Welcome, 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 my beautiful petals. This is the next episode of our Alchemy of Her series. And so, in this series of Instagram Lives, I am bringing in the stories that transformed her. So, the stories of the work that has transformed this beautiful soul, talking about those catalyst moments that made the whole difference within their story, and then the medicine that they are holding now. So in this episode, I have Verity with me.
Hi.
Hi. So Verity and I met at a networking event. And then you became one of my clients a little bit later on. So I think you joined us into a sound journey first. And then we stepped into a womb container together. And just throughout that journey, getting to know each other better and moving through those layers. And so, yeah, today I wanted to just bring in a little bit about you, a little bit about your story. And the concept around this is really that when people are connecting with us now, they are seeing where we are now in our journey. So they're often meeting us after after years, after roller coasters, after many cycles of death and rebirth and catalyst moment into our life that are bringing us to this point. And sometimes that is quite far away from our origin story. And so sometimes, when we're looking at someone's path and where they're at, we can maybe find it a little bit difficult to relate to that because we are so far away from that point. And so the desire in this series is to bring back our origin story and bring back like those catalyst moments, those crunchy moments that actually were the highlights, were those guiding lights within our journey and within our path that we then followed those breadcrumbs into where we are now.
Okay.
So, yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Where to start? So my catalyst moment, my big catalyst moment was probably when I was 30. And I had never had any therapy at all over anything in my past. And I felt as if my whole life was falling apart. My marriage was falling apart, relationships around me. I'd lost so many friends because I was easily triggered by lots of things. I was just a very angry person, to be honest. I was carrying a lot of anger from probably when I was about 10. And I made the brave step to have counselling. And that changed my life completely. And during my counselling journey, I dealt with a lot of sexual trauma from my teenage years, um, a lot of stuff that happened in my childhood. Basically, it's too long to get into this right now in this episode, um, but it really helped me to understand myself better. It helped me to understand my patterns. It helped me to understand why I reacted in certain ways. And that was kind of the first step into where I am now, basically. So I had counselling for years, probably for about 5 years in total, like constantly, because there was a lot to work through. And I then thought, wow, like this has changed my life. I want to help other women that have experienced these things. And I started my counselling course. So I completed my level 2 and 3, and I was about to start my degree in counselling, and something just didn't sit right with me. I felt like I had so much life experience and so much that I wanted to say that the thought of being a counsellor and not being able to um, not being able to give them any advice as such, it almost felt like I was being choked, the feeling of it. And that was when I just thought, I'm going to see what else is out there. And actually, I'd never had hypnotherapy before. So most people, when they decide to do a hypnotherapy course have usually had it themselves, but I hadn't. And I just got drawn to it and the whole magic of it. And I was like, oh, okay, this sounds good. So I joined a hypnotherapy course and I didn't really know what to expect. I had a friend who was already a hypnotherapist, but quite a new friend. So this had kind of crept into my field before I met her. So I was obviously meant to meet her. And she actually talked me into doing it. She was like, just do it, because even if you don't do anything with it in your life, it's just going to change you. It's going to change your life completely. And it absolutely did. And in one of the practice sessions, I was still kind of like, I love this, but I'm not quite sure how magical
Mm.
this is. And on one of the sessions, she worked on me for fear of flying. I've always had a fear of flying logically, and this is where I love the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So consciously, I thought that it was because I flew a lot when I was younger as an unaccompanied minor, and I had the responsibility of my two younger siblings flying with them. So that's where I thought it had come from. And the hypnotherapy that I'm trained in is not the traditional solution focused hypnotherapy. We actually go back and we look at the root cause of why you have a fear, or why you have anxiety, or whatever we're working on, and we deal
Mm.
with it at the root cause. And it actually went back to when I was very, very young, and I was on a roundabout and I was out of control on a roundabout, and that had caused my fear of flying. But it's because I was out of control. I couldn't control that airplane. And I actually was flying the next day after this session, and I thought, oh, it wouldn't have worked. And the next morning, I was so bad at flying that I had to take diazepam. I was absolute nervous wreck from the moment I left the house until I got to the destination. And I went with one of my closest friends, and on the airplane, she was like, "Are you okay? You're acting really calm and
Yeah.
you're really different." And I didn't tell her until we got to Rome. And I said I had hypnotherapy yesterday for flying, but I had to test it out fully before I told you that. And I was just blown away. And since then, I have just, after one session, I have just never experienced fear of flying since.
Yeah, very interesting
Um,
because in my mind, you're such a travel person, like I'm always like imagining you like jumping on a plane and going on a beach somewhere. So, like, yeah, I would have never associated fear of flying with you, if that makes sense, just
So
because
it
of
never
like,
stopped me. Yeah,
mm,
it never stopped me, but I had to take all of these steps to get there. It was so stressful, and kind of all those anxiety driven behaviors would creep in, and I'd be like just in full panic mode. So now I just know that I could just leave the house, and that is why I've been traveling more the last couple of years, because I'm in that space now where I'm just like, oh, it just feels so freeing. So that was kind of what led me into like, wow, this actually works. Like, this is amazing. If this has worked over this, then like, what else can it work on? And then I had had insomnia for about 15 years, and I was also on medication for that. So I had one session on my sleep, and then ever since then I've slept all night. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. So that kind of built my trust in that modality. um I had worked, I'm going backwards a little bit now. I've always worked one to one with women since I was 16, because I was a holistic and beauty therapist and I had my own business. So I was very used to working with women on a one to one. And during that time, I learned so much about women, because
mm.
even when they're in for a leg wax or a massage, I would be the person that they felt safe with to offload to. And a lot of my clients would always say, I just come for the therapy, even before before I'd
Yeah,
done any
yeah.
training. So they'd say, therapy comes free with my nails. And then I was just like, oh, okay. And it started feeling a little bit uncomfortable to me, because I was thinking, actually, this is quite cheap therapy for everybody.
Yes.
Um, so, yeah. So I've always worked with women on a one-to-one. I've learned lots about women over the years, and so that we hold so much as women, that the expectation of women is so high. It's always been something that I felt really passionate about, helping women to get to a point where they can take time for themselves, and they can recognize when they're stressed, when they need to calm down. Because for me, motherhood has been my biggest lesson. And when I look back to when my children were small, I wish I knew everything that I do now. Um, I wish I had been more calm. I wish I'd been more present and all of those things. So you're so right when you say you see someone now and you think you forget about their journey, because I was a very ragey parent when my children were small. And I always say, I've got three children, and I always say to my eldest that he had it the worst, because I was only 20 when I had him, and yeah, I had a hell of a lot of healing to do and a hell of a lot of work to do. And my youngest has always almost had me at my best, because I've been a much more calmer, present parent to him, and my middle one's kind of just been
Bit of
thrown in the
both.
mix of
Yeah.
you know, had a bit of both. Um, anyway, I've completely digressed now and lost where I was at.
Mm.
So I then did so hypnotherapy, absolutely loved it. And I went to more like the coaching side than the counselling side. So
Mm.
even though I use those skills in my therapy that I learn in my level 2 and 3, um, I do a lot of coaching, a lot of listening, because we were taught in our hypnotherapy course that your client comes in, you ask how they are, you get them to close their eyes, and you do the work. That didn't sit right with me, and me being a person that always has to break the rules and doesn't like to fit in a box was like, no, I'm not doing it like that. So I did start like that because that's what I was told to do, and I was like, this just does not feel right to me, because I was so used to being in that environment on a one-to-one with women, and I knew how much they wanted to offload because they didn't have that space to. And we've had this conversation, haven't we, Anaïs, about this, how important that is, just that offload. um, so the beginning of my sessions is always that part, because I feel like as a woman, if I'm going somewhere, that is the part that I need to do, which is healing in itself. And then I can relax fully. I felt like a woman coming in and just being told to close their eyes, that would not work. That would not work. It will work for some people, but for a lot of women, when we're 100 miles per hour trying to do everything, that is just, yeah, you just need that
that
offload
switch
first.
that switch from like that like blah, 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 whatever is happening within like our inner landscape, and then from there into like, can you now relax and close your eyes, like that can be a really steep kind of like adaptation, especially, depending on where your clients are meeting you as well, like where they are in their journey. That might be something that they also haven't really trained that muscle, right? Like, but now when we have like really strong meditation practices, for example, it's easier for us to go from like that active into that passive state. But definitely like the first days, months, years of like doing it, that transition period is something that we work on. So yeah, I completely hear you, especially when people are in a crunchy moment in their life, or if they are at a more starter part of like that journey, that adaptation, that switch off can take more time.
Absolutely. And they wouldn't feel safe to do that, because the women that I work with, when they're coming in, they're not in I'm a stranger to them. They're not just going to feel comfortable to just sit and close their eyes. And also, um, where my hypnotherapy is very different, we go very deep. A client just wouldn't feel safe to be doing that work. And actually, it takes me kind of, I don't usually do any really deep work until the third session with them, until they're used to my voice, because my hypnotherapy voice is very, very different to my voice now. I'm not going to demonstrate it right
I was just about to say, but I'll do it in session anyhow. But yes,
now.
curiosity now. I'm like,
My hypnotherapy voice is very, very different, and it's a different it's hypnotic language, so it's very, very different to what I'm speaking to you right now. So I always kind of do a session where like I'm getting to know them, and then I always end with like a relaxation hypnosis for them to take away with, so then they can get used to my voice between that and the
mm,
next session. And then I kind of like ease them in gently, because it's all about easing them in gently, so that then we can kind of, they feel safe with me, they recognize most importantly, their subconscious recognizes my voice. So then by that third session, we can regress and do the deep work. You could do it before that, but I just don't think, it wouldn't sit right with me, and I don't think it would sit right with a lot of my clients.
yeah, it's that
Um,
process, and I feel like when we are learning any modality, I think you've heard me say this before. There is like, there is the maiden state and there is the mother state. So when we are in our maiden, when we have just learned something, I think it's normal that initially we kind of replicating what we have learned, right? We had the book, we had the rules, we had the teachings, and that it is, I feel like in any modality, even in energy healing, right? We learn the hand placements and we just follow what we've been told like to do. And it takes like a little bit of time for us then to step into that actually translation into our own version of this and what feels good to us and stepping into so like the maiden copies the mother creates. So we are taking this and we are really integrating it with what feels good for us, and also the frequency that we are carrying and how we are wanting to offer this work, right? So it's like this
Absolutely.
transition period as well until we are anchored into, no, this is actually what feels the best to me into offering this.
Yeah, absolutely. But when anybody asks me what I do, you're gonna laugh now, aren't you?
Yeah.
I struggle with answering that question because I do a lot of somatic work. I do inner child work. I do a lot of energy work whilst working with my clients. Sometimes they're not even aware that as energy healers, we are healing them as they're offloading to us we've kind of, before the step when they actually know we're doing the work. I combine a lot into my sessions, and that's why I had to kind of stretch my sessions to so long. So now they're like 2 hours, and usually half the session is kind of that coaching, that counselling side, and then the second half of the session is where we kind of do the deep work. So in my sessions, you'd be gently put into hypnosis, which takes about 14 minutes, and then to do it in a nice, gentle way. And then dependent on what we're working on that session, we would regress, we would look at, what needs to come up, what's ready to be shown to you by the subconscious mind, where we kind of regress you back to where, if we were working for anxiety, for example, where that anxiety has come from.
Mm.
And
So when
then
you say regress, you mean like going, like tracing back the steps
yeah.
into like the root cause
Yeah. So
and having a look at that initial point of like where that originated from.
Yeah, so we get back to the root cause. The subconscious will only ever show you anything that it knows you are ready to see, because a lot of people get scared about what's going to come up, but the subconscious will only ever show you what you're ready to see. And then we in that moment, we then do the inner child work. So we go back and we reparent that child. We give that we give that child everything that she needed, which is really, really powerful. That's my favorite part of the work. A lot of emotion is released in that moment. And then we move on to it's a Gestalt therapy technique, actually, and it's where we cut ties with that memory. Now that we've given that inner child everything that she needed in that moment, we then cut ties with that memory in the most positive way. So it's not that you're forgetting that memory completely, but we are letting it go so it no longer has impact on our lives now. And in that moment as well, I always do a body scan of what's coming up in the body, because that's so, so important. So where are you feeling it in your body? And we do a lot of release work then as well.
Mm.
And then I always finish with some NLP techniques, because I love them, because that's kind of flipping back to a positive all the time. And that's what I love about hypnotherapy. So I feel like talk therapy absolutely has its place. It changed my life. It's absolutely amazing. And I know for you, Anais, that's kind of where your journey started as well on your own healing. But I don't know about you, some sessions I would come out and just be like, oh my God, my whole life's just been turned upside down. And now I've got to wait a week until I speak to someone again. Whereas I just love that you're kind of giving that inner child everything she needs. You're cutting ties with that memory. And then we're kind of straight away flipping everything back into a positive.
Mm.
So some clients go away and they feel really like tired, because it's hard work. It's really hard work. Your brain is doing so much work in those sessions. And sometimes clients can be a little bit tearful, but most of the time, 90% of the time, that client, when they're leaving my room, is really happy and they feel like a weight has lifted off their shoulders because they're just like, oh my God, I didn't realize how much I've been carrying for so long. Um, I've just
Mm.
totally gone off on one, haven't I now?
I think for me, like, yeah, like, in my own journey, the way that I'm seeing it is like I had this, this wall ball with all of like those knots, like all like interlinked together and into like this mess. And I
Mm.
think talk therapy that I did over many years in different formats really helped me like following that thread, like finding like that knot and like untying it and then understanding the links, making sense of my childhood, making sense of like the relationships. It was like really supporting me into untying this and also really the acknowledgement of how messed up part of what my life had been, because I think there was also like a lot of normalizing some of like the dynamics and some of the trauma that I was going through. There was like, as a survival mechanism, there was a level of like, oh, but that's just kind of like how things are, right? And then having that kind of like reflected back within like talk therapy really helped me to really realize actually how impactful it had been. But
Yeah.
there was definitely a moment in my journey where I was like, and now what, right? I have untied the knots. I have spoken about everything. I understand like, like how those different elements came like to be, but how do I move from that space? Right? How do I then not repeat the same pattern? Now that I can see the patterns, how do I not repeat the same patterns? Right? How do I break up with those patterns? How do I go back to my inner child and give her what she needs so I don't re-engage in those things? And I think this is where like talk therapy for me reached like that limit of like
Mm.
it really helped me deal with the past, but it didn't really, I feel like, equip me for like the future, and it didn't equip me for then the situations that were kind of like life happening within my life and knowing how to deal with them differently. So I definitely reached that moment where I was just like, okay, this has been so helpful and this has been so great. And even at that moment, I stayed in therapy, I think, for like another year as I was tying in those other bits. But that's when for me there was like more of the other elements that came in where I went seeking like energy work and somatic work and, like past life regression and like those aspects to really like support me into like that forward action, that forward movement.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And all of these therapies are wonderful, aren't they? And all of them are such like special parts of our journey. Um, and they're all just as important as each other. But I know, like you say, the energy work has been a massive part of my healing, and working with you on the womb healing has just been amazing. Um, it's not for the light-hearted at all with everything that it
Yeah.
brings up. You've definitely got to be ready to step into that, but it has been incredible. So thank you for holding that space for me. It's been amazing. And I'm sure that a lot of the women that I work with will be coming your way because I'm always talking
Mm.
about it. And it's definitely made me realize, and actually without even noticing, I've kind of been bringing those feminine aspects into my work, which has been really beautiful as well.
Mm.
Um, because the women that I work with are usually at a point in their lives where they're kind of like, what now?
Mm.
Their children are kind of at an age where they're, not dependent on them.
Independent. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, who am I? Like they've lost their identity along this kind of a wonderful journey that motherhood is, where we all end up over giving so much of ourselves, and it's kind of like, wow, now I've got some time for me, but who am I? What do I want? Kind of vibe. And I do work with women that don't have children as well, but they're kind of all at that point. They're all at that point of like, okay, either like I've got to deal with my crap now that I've been
Mm.
holding for so long because this is not gonna kind of be how the rest of my life is, or they're the mums that are kind of, I don't even know who I am.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, so I feel like that feminine element is so important to kind of bring that back in, because I feel like that gets, even though we're kind of in that mothering, nurturing kind of phase, I do feel like that gets lost towards us.
Yeah, so I work with women actually a lot in that same space,
Mm.
like so I call it threshold because that's what my program is called. But like, that threshold moment where it is like just this something has to change, but you can't quite qualify it often. And you're like just like in that in between where life cannot carry on as it currently is for whatever reason, but you don't quite know yet how to move forward. And you're like in that in between space. And so, yeah, often I meet women that are, you know, um, getting a divorce, for example, that are like in that part of their life, or like they're getting a divorce, or they're like really realizing that their career isn't actually what they wanted. Or they're, yeah, yes, where like their children are now all kind of like semi-independent, right? So there is not that need for that constant support. And so they are now like suddenly, okay, we are, 10, 15 years later, who am I now? Because like that journey of motherhood has been so transformational, and it's not even reconnecting them back to who they were because that person doesn't exist anymore. And it's figuring out now kind of like where they're at, who they are, like that second bloom like of their life. And so it's like really like that moment into supporting them and guiding them and giving them like the tools of really connecting with like what that next step is actually looking like.
Because back to what you just said about divorce, that comes up a lot, and it's not always that the women that come to me are getting divorced, but they're in a place of like, I don't even know what to do now in my relationship because I've given so much to my children. I don't even know what to do with this man or woman that's in my life because I've given so much of me, and that kind of gets left behind. That part, that part of your relationship gets left behind. Um, so for a lot of women, they are questioning that. Like, am I
Mm,
happy? Am I happy? Like now
yeah.
my children aren't here. Now my whole world is not revolved around my children. Who am I, and am I actually happy?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like, who am I? Am I actually happy? What do I actually want? What do I actually like?
Yeah.
What do I want my life to
What do
look
I
like
need?
now? Like, what do I need? And
Yeah.
it's like this whole like falling back in love with yourself as well. And that journey really of like getting to know this version of you. And if you are in a relationship, if it, like that, getting to know also like that other person that is also going probably to similar-ish, process, and that like finding yourselves back. And that's like such like I feel like such a pivotal, such a crunchy moment of that really like realizing that aha moment of like, is my life in alignment? Like, what do I actually want? Like, have I built this life that I have? Like really from like that compass of joy and love and passion and want, or somewhere along the way did I get lost a little bit? Did I start following the I should, or like the stability and the security? And there is nothing wrong with that, but there is often this moment of like taking stock of like, what is this actually like about? And often they are ready to move from a different place.
Absolutely.
Hmm. And
Absolutely.
so if we just go back for like a little bit, so we
Sorry,
had this,
that's me.
no, it's okay. So we had this conversation before, but so you didn't really have like a big spiritual awakening, right? You didn't really have like that gate blasting open, but there's always been like this intuition. There's always been this part that like those breadcrumbs that you've like naturally like followed. And you had like from your earlier share, you had like as an adult, you had to deal with a lot of boxes that you had kept kind of like underneath, filled with a lot of difficult experiences, which was creating like this pattern of anger and unsettledness. So you arrived in your 30s in like a difficult place in your marriage. You were a mom already at the time, but you were also a successful business owner, right? You already had like your beauty business. So from the outside, your life probably looked great because yeah, you had a marriage, you had children, you had a great business, right? But inside of you, there was just something that was like not quite there, right? There was just
Hmm.
like a disconnect. that was happening, and that's what brought you into counseling. And from that point, like
Yeah.
that breaking open, like that rupture, and then throughout like that journey, at some point arriving of like, okay, I want to be of service now.
Yeah.
And then for you to look into how can I be of service, the counseling, the hypnotherapy, and then you trained in energy work as well along the way somewhere there, right?
Yeah. So I trained in Reiki when I was about 20, and then I trained in Rahani probably when I was about 35, I think. So yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And how would you say how would you qualify yourself now? You know, like in a sense of like when you're looking back at that version of you and where you are now, like how much have things changed?
I wouldn't even recognize if you were to show me right now. No. And when you said about people think like, your life seemed perfect, I think that was the hardest thing when people, because me and my husband actually split up. I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. I'm really not happy. And then he went and had his own counselling, and I kind of went and did mine. And then we broke up in the January, and then we went into lockdown. But we were still living together because even though we were apart, we were still really good friends, and we've always worked really well as a team. But there was this like, oh my God, we're going into lockdown and we're not together. This is going to be hell. But actually, because it just kind of stripped back everything, all the stress, we both couldn't work. Um, so I think that was the first step in his spiritual awakening, actually, because it was just kind of everything was taken from us. Money was taken. We've both got our own businesses. Money was taken from us. We had to take mortgage breaks. We had to take finance breaks on our cars. Like everything was gone. And that actually was so beautiful because from that, we come back together again.
Mm.
But yeah, if you showed me a little video clip of me probably 12 years ago, I would not even recognize that person.
Angry control freak, like being like very in that containment, right?
Shouty mum every day. And now I can't even remember the last time I shouted. I cannot honestly, hand on heart, remember. I've obviously raised my voice a few times, like we have to, but I don't remember the last time I shouted. But every morning it would be like, "Rah!" And it's just not like that now. Actually, now when I experience stress, I'm just like, what is this?
I
I
remember
don't
this
like
feeling.
this.
What is this again?
Yeah.
It echoes something. Oh yeah, this.
Yeah.
Mm,
Whereas it's just crazy to think that I was just in that constantly,
mm.
just in
In that
that
fight or
one.
flight.
Yeah, that's quite scary.
In that like survivor, right? And it's like sending that version of us also loads of love back,
Oh,
right? Because
absolutely.
like we didn't have the tools, like we didn't know better. And it's taking us, like along the journey of like landing into different moments of actually having the hindsight of looking back and being like, oh, this wasn't how it was, just, like the default setting, and not really realizing actually, how much wounding there was into this, how much a coping mechanism, how much adaptation there was actually, and from what place we were actually like bringing in that energy. And so it's just like sending all of those versions of us, loads of love, because I often have this conversation with women, especially when they're moms, like that mom guilt of like, like the versions that they weren't like
Mhm.
for their children. And it's holding that and appreciate that was at the same time, really bringing in that love and that gracefulness of like, but you didn't know better and you didn't have the tools. And it's not that you made a conscious decision of like, I want to be an angry parent, right? It's like
It's
you
our
didn't.
programming, right? If we've been
Yeah.
brought up in that environment as well.
Yeah, definitely, because so much of like what we're carrying is like that learned behavior
Mm.
from like society, from our own family environment, from that and like that rewiring. And I feel especially like when people become like first time mothers, they are so inequipped, in that way of like just like that repeating of like the patterns. Or trying so hard to go the opposite direction that like getting
Oh, yeah.
just from this place of actual like deeper wisdom that lays within like your womb is definitely like a journey. So yeah, for me it's always just this reminder of like wherever you are on your journey, like sending yourself like a hug and some love and like this but just also this really acknowledgement that it doesn't have to be like that.
No.
There is like a way out of staying stuck within like the survivor mode and staying stuck in like our programming. There are many beautiful ways to enable us to actually move out of that, move away from that, like move away from those patterns, break those patterns. So it's not, like this, we're not, it might feel like it, but we're not trapped there.
Yeah, and it does feel like that when you, especially when you first start off, you think, I am never going to be a, you're never going to be able to change these behaviors. This is just how it's always going to be.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. That's the thing that I remind a lot of my clients about. You have a choice.
Yeah.
You do. And I think a lot of us forget that we actually do have a choice.
Yeah, because so often, like especially like as women, we go through this journey of and this societal aspect, this programming of like being disconnected actually from our power. And
Mm-hmm.
so we are getting like conditioned into actually making ourselves smaller and making ourselves quieter, right? And like talk less, smile more. Like there is a lot of us that still grew up with like that being the message that we were seeing like all around us. And so that whole like shift from like life is happening to us to life is happening for us, and that reminding that we are in the driver's seat, and that all of like that wisdom, that deep inner wisdom, is already living within us, and it's living within our bones, it's living within our womb space. But it may be that somewhere along the way all of those programming and trauma and wounding have like robbed us from like that clarity of where like our compass is wanting to lead us. And so it's like finding ways for us to be reprogramming, to stepping out of that, and then like that following that thread. But it comes with the decision of like no more. It
Yeah,
needs to start from that decision of something has to change, and then finding the right support system and the right methods and the right modalities to support us along the way as we are doing that.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Definitely. Again, with the womb work that we have done together, that's just changed so much. That's shifted so much in such a short space of time as well. Like I say, it's been intense, but it's been so worth it.
Hmm.
Like, and any work we do is worth it. I don't think anyone ever turns around and says, gosh, I wish I hadn't done that work on myself.
Yes. And even, even if in that moment you feel like it, which does, I feel like for some people happen, there is again this, you may not be able to see how this piece right now is fitting within this broader puzzle. And
But
then
when
like
you're on the other side, yeah,
exactly, or like 5 years like 5 years out, you'll suddenly be sitting there and be like, that piece, this is how it is actually coming together. This is actually like, like without that needed to happen to create that bridge into like that other part. So I'm always saying that with like those different like experiences, there are loads where we can't really, put our finger on it, but they've all been parts of like the building blocks into allowing us to be doing this work and for like everything like to come together. So even if in the moment it doesn't feel like, it feels like, a waste of time, a waste of money, my invitation is just like it's already done, it's already happened. And you may be surprised of where with hindsight that piece is actually fitting in within your story.
yeah, because everything
Hmm.
is meant to be where you are right now is where you're meant to be.
I know, and sometimes that can be a really difficult pill to swallow. Like, I remember, like again, like years ago, we're talking probably like 15 years ago. Like, I had this book, and like the opening part of the book is basically about that. It's about like, you've chosen your soul journey and this and that. And at the time, I think the book flew through the room more than once. I'm like, what the hell is this? No, who would choose this? Like, and like really like a lot of like feelings about it. And it was a real journey into sitting with that, and appreciating that without all of those experiences, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And that is the summary of all like the pleasant and unpleasant experiences of my life. And that, sometimes it's like eating a little bit of humble pie in that, like remembering of that.
And I think that comes up quite a lot in the because I do QHHT as well, so like the past life, and I think that does help a lot of people to recognize that as well.
Mm.
that everything that has happened, even in past lives, has all led to where you are now.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've definitely got to be in a certain place to accept. Accept.
Exactly. And it's also okay if that's a work in progress, right? It's also okay if that is something that we work towards, because depending the shapes and the flavors that our lives have taken, this may be, like easier or more crunchy to really bring in and to integrate. And it's like that, just, also like taking the pressure off of having it all figured out, and just like that, really that one step at a time, and really finding that what is like supportive for us, and accepting that that also will change over time, and that getting those tools and learning then how to use those tools, so that we can be in a place where we are claiming back our power, and where we can actually like move from that space. It feels like so crucial. And again, I feel like as women we have been conditioned in being disempowered through like many lenses, through shame that we carry around our cycle, around our womb, around our sexuality, around our physical expression, and like a lot of narratives there that have been programmed within us, but that actually are superficial. That underneath all of that, there is actually like a deeper level of knowing and wisdom that is living within us, and that journey of like actually feeling that power,
Mm-hmm.
feeling our compass, and like that building that inner authority, I feel is like so massive for women.
And I think your work is very similar to mine. Well, I think anyone that's working in this space, that is the ultimate goal, right? Is to get your client to see their power and to step into that power and to
Yeah.
use their voice, and all of the things that we've kind of, like you've already said, that we've been told to not do. It's kind of bringing all of that back in and giving them, showing them that they have that power within them.
Yes, because we can't have sovereignty when we don't understand like the choices, when we don't have access to the tools that are allowing us to move forward. Then we can't be sovereign. It's only like with having like the actual information, the actual wisdom, the actual options, that then we can make sovereign choices. And that is like a really big journey. And depending on where women are at, that may take again like very different shapes and very different ways of like that reconnecting into like that inner wisdom. And inner wisdom, starts from anything between, checking in with your body before, do I actually, am I having this cup of coffee because this is what I'm doing every morning, versus does my body actually want this cup of coffee
Yeah,
right now? To all the way to big life decisions of like, yes, breaking up like friendships and relationships and career moves, and all of like those big pivotal life moments. They are built upon all of those micro decisions and all of those micro moments. So the more we can connect with like that inner truth, and really like that checking in with ourselves, and that piece of like knowing that we are listening from a place of the heart, and we're listening from a place of the womb, and not from a place of coping mechanisms or adaptations or wounding, the more like that is feeding into being able to navigate those bigger decisions with that inner alignment and that North Star, and really knowing within ourselves that we are moving from that place of power.
absolutely. Intuition's so important. And I think for a lot of women, it's just them building that confidence back up to trust themselves again. And like
Yeah.
you say, those little micro, like those little tiny weeny little decisions, even about your coffee in the morning, that's all helping you to trust yourself again and to build that intuition back.
Yeah, because I think like, for me, intuition, and I know we all have like our takes on this, right? But for me, our intuition lives in our womb, right? Or like it's
Hmm.
anchored within our womb space. And so when women are really disconnected from that part, it can be really difficult to really also move from that space. So in a lot of my clients often have like a sense of intuition. They have like that little bit of like, oh, like that information coming in, or that compass wanting to go into that direction, or like, like it's coming in, that connection isn't the issue, but it's then
Trust.
moving
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
trust, right? It's like the trusting within then ourselves that, like that is actually guidance, right? It's like trusting in ourselves that we are not, we're not crazy, or like that, like, and or that we understood this correctly, and that this is actually something. And so often then when we're not anchored within like that part of us, when we are not like feeling like that power and that sovereignty and that alignment within us, what happens is like that message comes through, and that gut feeling, that breadcrumb, right, comes in, and then we're doubting it, right? We're just like, we're doubting it, or we're pushing it away, or we are over explaining it in our head, and we're like kind of like putting it apart, and actually, it doesn't make logical sense. So we're not going to do this. And again, intuition is a big range from, suddenly leaving the house and being like, I should take an umbrella, despite it being super sunny, right? And then like suddenly you're like, nah, the weather forecast has said it's going to be fine. And then, you go on your walk, and then you come back absolutely drenched because it started raining in the middle of your walk, despite what the weather lady said. And it ranges all the way from that to, like knowing that we need to take a different direction in our life. Knowing that there is a disconnect in like a relationship, knowing that we have to jump on that plane to go like to that location because there is something there for us that we can't quite right now, financially justify, or that we can't quite like intellectually explain of why we have to go there. And again, it's that range. And the more we learn to trust ourselves within those micro moments, the more we are able to trust ourselves within like those macro moments. And so there is really like this aspect there of like that it's often not like this the lack of the intuition coming in that I'm witnessing in my clients, but it's like, what do we do from there?
Yeah, absolutely. And then from that, your own awareness comes in, your awareness of what you are doing in situations, your awareness of, why did I just act that certain way? Or why do I feel this certain way when that person said that? Because once you've kind of started trusting yourself, trusting that intuition, all of that just feels so much easier. Not easy at the same time, because then it gives you more and more and more to work on. But yeah, that's where that awareness comes in.
Yeah, there is definitely an element of like, it's giving us information. So again, we can be in that sovereignty of knowing where to act from. And it can be, it can be a little bit crunchy, because equally once we have made that connection, we can't unsee it. So then, like when we are aware that there is like a little bit of like, like a disconnect, or something being activated, or something being like triggered, like we can't unsee it. So there is like, now we have to do something about it, right? Or we're actually conscious of it. So like being conscious of it means then not necessarily that we're going to act, or that we're going to do something, but there is this level of awareness. Was maybe before there wasn't that level of awareness. So we were just like, da, 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 everything is fine. And now like we can't unsee it. But it is all like elements that are helping us getting into a place also like of inner peace.
Absolutely. That's so
And
important.
yeah, being able to be in situations and being able to be like in relationships without like a whole nervous system having like, like meltdowns, and without all of those parts being kind of like pushed or tickled or activated, depending on like depending on the flavor and depending on the elements. But that really being able to be grounded within ourselves and comfortable with who we are, comfortable within our truth, and being able to move from that space like in the world. And actually a lot of those very loud triggers will melt away. They will just melt away as we are going, right? And
And
we
that's just
don't.
so magical to experience that, when you're just like, oh, this is different.
Yes, exactly. Same situation that would have occurred, maybe like 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, but your reaction to it is so completely different, because you are in a completely different place within yourself. Like none of the external factors have actually changed. It's you
Yeah.
that has like changed in that. And that like really then again, the sovereignty of being able to decide when we are picking up conversations and when we're not, when we are stepping into or when we are taking like a step out, like that really like that power into knowing that we have choice again.
Absolutely. That's so important. You always
Mm.
have a choice.
Mm. So is there anything else that you want to say
Oh,
to
so much, but I'm going to stop.
in this session? in this
We could
session.
speak for about 10 hours straight, I'm sure.
100%. So, yeah, is there anything else that you wanna share with women that are listening to us before we are closing this space?
Um, just if any of this resonates to you, just reach out. I work in 3 and 6 month programs. And yeah, just drop me a message if you want to know any more.
I love that as well. That it's like those longer containers, as well that are, allowing for more like of an unfolding again, like over time, rather than a quick fix. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it's a quick fix that we need for certain
Oh,
situations,
absolutely.
but
That's why like solution focused hypnotherapy is so good, because if you don't, if it is something you want to work on that you don't want to talk about, you don't want to like go back to the past, like that is perfect for that as well. And that's something that sometimes when I have discovery calls with clients, I actually refer to someone for that if I don't feel that they are ready for like the 3 and 6 month program, or they just they're just not that person to be doing that work. But I do, like I said earlier, about having counselling and kind of being left for a week without being able to speak to that
mm,
counsellor. That's why I think you work the same, Inés, in those containers.
yeah.
You can actually message me at any time. Like we deal with things in the moment as they're happening. And I always get back to my clients as soon as I can within like 9 till 5, Monday to Friday window. And that's really, really powerful because as things are coming up, we are dealing with it there. There
Mm.
and
I think that's part of like what I want to say here is like that it's like depending on where you are at on your journey and what you also like need. So I feel like, it's a difference kind of like between like a plaster, and like going like deeper, or like better way of explaining this, right, is like, you're having like a little bit of like a stomach, upset, and you're having like a ginger tea in the moment to help you calm that, versus looking at your nutrition and what you're
Mhm.
eating in general and what is the kind of like causing that, right? And I feel like sometimes depending on where you're at, maybe you need that quick solution, like that quick like ginger tea to just help you get out of that.
And it's
And then
amazing
some,
because I had some solution focused therapy last year and it was amazing for what I was dealing with. And it was just like, bang, done
um,
straight
yeah.
away. Yeah.
Exactly. And then sometimes we are in that journey of like, okay, no, I actually want to go deeper and I want to
Yeah.
understand like where is that is coming from and how to change it and how to like, go at the root of it to rewire like deeper parts of us. So it's again always just like that inner wisdom of like, where am I at and what do I need right now? And I want to say also like how much like, impact is that's having in my life right now. Do I need to put like a plaster on right now before I can go into those deeper layers and having a look at what is happening underneath? And I'm saying that as well because like I'm holding different types of containers, and I'm offering Rahani energy healing containers when we are like more like at that stage of like wanting to look at our heart space and wanting to look at like our inner balance. And then like often when the womb comes in, it's when people are ready to go more into that deeper level, that like underneath. And it's definitely requiring people to be in a certain space in their life where they're ready to go down there, to go down into like that underworld, that portal of like deep wisdom and ancient remembering. But there is also so much ancestral elements there. So, and it's so much of like how we are relying on other people as well and relating. And so I feel like, you need to be in a place in your life where you also have the spaciousness to be dealing with that. And often when people are in that crisis stage, that is a little bit, too much to step into that space. And so we are looking into calming things down first and looking into bringing in like more like of that heart frequency, and bringing them into a place with like more inner peace
Mm.
and more like that, yes, like that calmness to then being able to journey deeper in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. And I just think if anybody's watching this and they're interested in hypnotherapy, I think hypnotherapy will always work no matter what modality of hypnotherapy you
Mm.
work with. It's still going to have excellent results. It just depends what lens you want to look at it through.
Yeah,
Because
and what
hypnotherapy is magic. So no matter what way you're doing it, it's gonna work.
And I also want to say the person, right? Because I think it's always a mix between the modality that we're holding and the frequency that we hold as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
like that blend between the two, that divine union between the two, that is actually creating the space that we are holding for other people. So, and I feel like so that's why like you could do Rahani energy healing with 10 different people and have a completely different container, have completely different results, have completely different vibes, because it's not only the modality, it's also like what like the parts of us and our frequency that we are bringing in within that. So
Oh,
it's also that
absolutely.
invitation again of like trusting our gut feeling when we feel attracted to be working with someone,
Absolutely.
and going for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And your Rahani is so different to other people's I've experienced. And yeah, so it is absolutely frequency and who you're drawn to.
Okay, perfect.
Let's
Thank
stop
you.
talking now, because otherwise
No,
this is going to carry
no,
on all
not
day.
yet. And you were afraid we weren't going to have like much to talk about. So okay. Thank
Thank you
you
so
very
much.
much for joining me today, and I hope to see all of your petals soon. Bye
Thank
bye.